February 1914. We are in the bustling streets of Cairo, Egypt. Amidst the vibrant markets and labyrinthine alleyways, Georges Aaron Benedict, a French philologist and Egyptologist, embarks on a quest for hidden treasures. In the maze of antiquities, Georges is astonished by what he sees: Naaman, an antique dealer, his stall adorned with what looks like authentic artifacts from the past. Little does Georges realize, this encounter will unveil a treasure of unimaginable value. Naaman presents Georges with a remarkable find, an archaic flint knife adorned with an ivory handle, meticulously crafted with exquisite finesse. Captivated by its state of preservation and archaic origins, Georges recognizes the artifact's significance and decides to purchase it. In a letter to Charles Barrow, head of the Antiquity Department of the Louvre in Paris, Georges describes the knife as a masterpiece of pre-dynastic sculpture, a tangible link to Egypt's ancient history. The handle depicts scenes of hunting and war, transporting Georges back to a time long forgotten. But there's a twist to this tale. The knife's style is very intriguing. It is strangely similar to Asiatic art, especially Sumerian art. It does not look like the typical Egyptian art. And the blade and handle of the knife are separated, unbeknownst to the seller. Recognizing the artifact's potential, Barrow proposes a restoration to unveil its full splendor. So, in March 1933, a man named Léon André meticulously restores the knife, carefully joining the blade and handle to reveal its true magnificence. The Gebel el-Arak knife, as it comes to be known, stands as a testament to the craftsmanship of ancient Egypt. Today, the knife resides in the Louvre, but beyond its physical beauty lies a deeper mystery, a mystery that may connect Kemet to ancient Sumer in Asia. Because the story does not end there. You know, the Gebel el-Arak knife isn't the only one. Many other artifacts with clear Asiatic or Sumerian influences have been discovered in Egypt, hinting at a connection between the two ancient civilizations. Could it be that we've been wrong all along? Could the origins of Kemet be traced back to Asia, specifically to Sumer, as many seems to suggest? Today we will delve into this ancient enigma, exploring the untold story of Kemet's origins and uncovering the secrets hidden within all these Sumerian-inspired artifacts.
Besides, when we look at the archaeological evidence, in my opinion, it becomes more difficult to categorically state that Naqada culture definitely derives from the south.
This clip was made by a YouTuber called Meta. He used the knife and numerous other Sumerian-looking artifacts found in Egypt to claim a significant Asiatic influence on the emergence of ancient Egypt. At the end of the clip, he asks us to explain that presence in pre-dynastic Kemet. That's exactly what we will do today. In order to answer that question, we need to know what makes artifacts significant in a civilizational context. The requirements are the following. The artifacts must perfectly integrate into the culture and traditions of the civilization, representing its dominant culture and style. But is it the case here? Let's see. Here is the Gebel el-Arak knife. What makes it Sumerian or Asiatic? The beard, clothes, and the style of the people depicted on it. You can clearly see the similarities with this other artifact from Sumer. But is this style part of the Egyptian civilization's culture? No. In Kemet, beards look like this. Just like what we see all over Africa. So this piece doesn't match the African kingdom's dominant style at all. The beard. We can't talk about pharaohs without discussing their beards, those iconic symbols of power and authority. You see, no matter how the pharaohs were depicted, one thing remained constant: their majestic beards. These facial adornments held immense significance, representing not only their regal stature but also their divine connection. The pharaoh's beard wasn't just a fashion statement. It embodied a profound symbol of their role as the intermediaries between the mortal realm and the divine. By wearing the beard, the pharaohs were believed to channel the qualities and wisdom of the gods themselves. Throughout Egyptian history, the shape and style of the pharaoh's beard evolved, reflecting the changing times. In the earliest periods, we see the short pointed beard, known as the royal beard, associated with Osiris, father of all pharaohs. A divine connection, indeed. As we move forward to the Middle Kingdom and beyond, the pharaoh's beard takes on a more stylized form, elongated, curved, sometimes even forked. This distinctive style, known as the Amun beard, pays homage to the god Amun, a central figure in Kemet. It represents the pharaoh's divine authority, rooted in the association with Amun. Now, it's essential to note that not all pharaohs wore physical beards. In some cases, the beard was depicted as a ceremonial or ritualistic accessory rather than an actual facial hair feature. But let me tell you, whether real or symbolic, the significance of the pharaoh's beard cannot be understated. It embodied their divine authority and their profound connection to the gods. But hold on tight, family, because here comes the twist. Are you ready? Now, let's analyze the other artifacts. Here are the pieces allegedly found in Badari and Nakada. The similarity with Sumerian art is striking. But are they representative of the Egyptian civilization style? Once again, not at all. Why? Here is the official style of ancient Egypt. You can see the convention with 1 foot forward. That's how Kemetic artists, who followed very strict conventions, depicted their people. But according to many, this is enough to claim that ancient Egyptians were highly influenced by Sumer. These tools have been used to attribute the origin of ancient Egypt to Mesopotamia since the early days of Egyptology. This debate has been ongoing for years, creating a competition between Africa and Asia. But why? Because it's still hard for many people to acknowledge the fact that the Kemetic civilization has been built by black people, by black Africans.
Scientists, white scientists.
Egypt was an amazing civilization.
No,
it was not created by black Africans. I'm sorry.
It wasn't? Who created it?
People who are white.
Since facts didn't support their wishes, they had to create a bunch of theories to give credit to Asia. That's also why many people still believe that these findings are forgeries built by Western scholars or taken from Asia and strategically placed in Egypt to support these theories. But as I always say, when we talk about ancient Egypt, we are not talking about a specific individual or about a single family. We are not talking about one pharaoh or dynasty. We are talking about an institution. This means that it takes more than a few individuals, knives, or statues to define an entire civilization. For example, here is a discovery that had been made in Turkey a few years ago. An ancient Egyptian amulet was discovered during excavations in Amastris, an ancient city located in the Amasra district of Bartın, Turkey. Does it mean that ancient Egyptians literally built and influenced the civilization in that area? Of course not. We know that Africans played a major role in the making of most ancient civilizations. We even know it from Greek accounts. But finding typical African artifacts there does not mean that it was literally built by Africans. And that's the same thing with Kemet. Finding tools with a Sumerian style in ancient Egypt does not mean that Sumerians influenced Kemet. In order for something to be considered a significant influence, as claimed by some Western scholars, it must meet certain criteria. Firstly, these elements' style must have originated within the influential civilization. Secondly, this style must have been consistently perpetuated in the official artistic conventions of the civilizations that were influenced for an extended period of time. Take, for instance, the Greek Kouros statues. They clearly express the influence of Kemet over Greece. Now, if you've dabbled in ancient Egypt, you've probably noticed their knack for codification. Conventions were everywhere, from the depiction of human beings to poses and measurements. It's what made ancient Egyptian artifacts instantly recognizable. And let me tell you, these conventions had a profound impact on shaping other civilizations in their early stages, like ancient Greece, for example. In a way, we can think of Kemet as having this powerful and inspiring branding. And let me tell you, guys, those conventions extended to their rulers as well. The Greek style started by closely imitating Egyptian art, and traces of this African influence can still be seen in Greek architecture as well as in later European art inspired by it. While artifacts with a Sumerian style have been found in Egypt, there is no evidence that this style influenced or was perpetuated in official Kemetic art. And the possibility of a sea battle between people from the two civilizations, as depicted on the knife, is impossible given their location. Therefore, claiming a Sumerian influence in the development of Kemet is unfounded. However, the origins of Kemetic culture and style are not a mystery anymore. We know exactly where it came from. What is the origin of the architecture of Kemet? It came from Nubia. The religion of Kemet? It came from Nubia. The writing system of Kemet? It emerged in Nubia. The kingship traditions of Kemet? It also emerged in Nubia. The gods of Kemet? They came from Nubia and Inner Africa. The mummification process of Kemet? It also came from Africa and was practiced by black Africans before the creation of Kemet. The first kings of Kemet? They came from Nubia and then conquered the north. In other words, all elements defining the Egyptian civilization or nation came from Black Africa and were initially practiced by Black Africans. The Great Sphinx itself has the face of a black man in that area supposed to be the land of Mediterranean people. So, why does the Sphinx doesn't look like a typical modern Mediterranean like some seems to suggest? A few days ago, I asked you guys on YouTube and Twitter who deserved the status of original or indigenous Egyptians, and the majority of you responded that it was Upper Egyptians and Nubians. It means that you completely understand the dynamic of that country that I explain in the following video. In the Delta there were the Merimpt culture, a Neolithic culture that flourished in the Nile Delta region of Lower Egypt around 5000 BCE. The people of this culture were engaged in agriculture, animal husbandry, and fishing, and they built circular houses and used stone tools. But also the Mahdi culture, which is another Neolithic culture that developed in the Nile Delta region, this time on the eastern bank of the Nile River. The culture is named after the site of Mahdi, which was occupied from around 4000 BCE to around 3100 BCE. The people of the Mahdi culture were engaged in agriculture, animal husbandry, and trade, and they are known for their distinctive pottery. The Mahdi culture was the most important Lower Egyptian prehistoric culture, meaning that the foes of Narmer probably practiced that culture. As you can see, all these cultures flourished in the Delta area. But with Narmer's conquest of Lower Egypt, both cultures were replaced by the Naqada III culture. In other words, all these people ended up practicing the culture of the victors who came from the south. So, their culture did not influence the one of Kemet. It was replaced by it. A culture originating from Inner Africa migrated northward, forcefully subduing all opposition to establish itself as the predominant state culture in Kemet. Thus, it becomes evident that the knowledge and culture that characterize ancient Egypt have their roots firmly grounded in Black Africa. Now that we've analyzed the cultural and artistic elements, let's go a little deeper. In this section, let's explore the hypothetical scenario of a significant Sumerian influence, or even presence, in early Kemet. Additionally, let's consider the possibility that the ancient Sumerians did not exhibit a tropical phenotype with dark skin, and so on. As discussed in my previous video on ancient Europeans, Professor Krauss emphasized the correlation between the presence of a culture in a specific region and the likelihood of the presence of the people originally associated with that culture. This is also something mentioned by Dr. Krauss, who acknowledged that sometimes cultural changes meant population change.
Where we changed from being hunter and gatherers to early farmers, to agriculturalists with domestic animals, with crops. So there was this big change in the culture of the people. And we would like to understand is if this change of culture is also related to a change in the genetic makeup. So that this culture, which we first actually see in the Near East, in the so-called Fertile Crescent, if this change in culture was also related to maybe people coming from the Fertile Crescent, coming from the Near East, bringing domestic animals, bringing crops to Europe. So was it actually a genetic change of people with a massive inflow of genes in people into Europe with this new culture? Or was it actually something that kind of independently Europeans developed, or maybe triggered by some neighboring populations that had those ideas already and spread those ideas into centuries?
So, if we have these Sumerian artifacts in ancient Egypt, could it mean that a Sumerian population lived in ancient Egypt at that time and that they looked like modern Middle Easterners? We know the sites from which these art pieces have been found. Therefore, to answer that question, all we have to do is examine the anthropological analysis from these cities to see if it aligns with that theory. The pieces came from Nakata, Badari, and Abydos. Now, what do we know about these areas?
Who were the people of Nakata? Most experts agree that the development of ancient Egypt was essentially indigenous. The Badarians and the people of Nakata in Upper Egypt constituted the dominant indigenous cultures. Anthropologists Tracy Prose and Nancy Lavelle inspected their remains. They discovered that Nakata people had a higher status than their Egyptian peers. But something else surprised them. Phenotypically, the Nakata people were a bit different from their Egyptian contemporaries. Surprisingly, they were more like proto-dynastic Nubians. In other words, they were also black, yet they resembled very ancient Nubian inhabitants from areas like Kustal, where the earliest royal tombs were discovered. As if they were a Nubian immigrant aristocratic community that had established in Nakata. But no evidence of significant population migration was found. However, this is compatible with ancient Egyptian literary works like the Edfu texts or the prophecy of Nefertiti, claiming Nubians were Egypt's ruling families. Pharaoh Narmer, Egypt's founding pharaoh, will be descended from the Nakata people. Subscribe to the channel and watch longer videos about this story. Who were the Badarians? Most experts, like Sonia R. Zakruski, demonstrated that ancient Egypt's development was primarily indigenous. That is, the individuals who built that civilization already lived in that territory right before its appearance. Who were they? According to studies, a few major cultural groups inhabited in the area before the dynastic period. The Badarians were among them. They lived in Middle Egypt. So, what did they look like? Numerous Western anthropologists who studied them provided answers. They discovered that the Badari people had short cranial vaults and significant subnasal prognathism, which is the anterior projection of the lower face relative to the upper face. This feature is the most observed among black Africans, contrary to other groups who have little to no prognathism. So, Egypt's indigenous inhabitants, the Badarians, were black Africans. This type of skulls have also been discovered in all locations surrounding Egypt. It's also clearly apparent on Egypt's most iconic monument, the Great Sphinx. However, this is the topic of our next video. Like, subscribe and activate the bell.
In his book, The New Excavations at Abydos, French archaeologist Émile Amelino writes the following after excavating royal tombs there. There aren't many items in this section, but perhaps they make up for their small number by their price. First of all, there is the small head of a wooden statuette shown on plate XXXI, number 1 in the lower row. This head was found, I remind you, in the same tomb as the stele of the king I called the Serpent King. Then he adds this. The head is complete and the statuette goes down to below the breasts. It is a statuette of a woman and of a Nubian type of woman. All those who examine it will, I believe, agree. The forehead is quite low, the face angular, the eyes small, the cheekbones prominent, the nose slightly blunt, the mouth wide, the lips thick. So, we see that phenotypically, the populations of these areas were black African. The kings even practiced a Nubian culture, evidence of their Nubian origin. Unless the Mesopotamians were also black Africans, which I believe to be partially true, I talk about it in this video. We see that the Egyptian people using these Sumerian tools were typically Africans. All studies prove that the population didn't come from somewhere else. They were indigenous Africans. And anthropological analysis of their remains prove that they were phenotypically similar to other southern Africans. So how do we explain the presence of these Sumerian tools in ancient Egypt? Well, they probably came from trade. Contrary to what most people believe, the ancient world was connected. Probably even as connected as our modern world. People traded with each other, they traveled, migrated, etc. These tools are not evidence of a so-called Sumerian influence that triggered the development of ancient Egypt, but probably evidence of trade between ancient populations. There is absolutely nothing similar in Egyptian art. I want to add that this does not mean that there weren't ancient Middle Eastern people in ancient Egypt. Kemet was a massive country that experienced numerous invasions and migration waves from other parts of the world. These people brought with them all their cultures and sometimes constituted communities inside Kemet's cities, a bit like Chinatown today. However, this does not mean that these cultural elements were part of Kemet's state institution. As I said earlier, we are talking about the institution of Kemet, not about random individuals. When we look closely at that institution, it is clear that it is entirely rooted in the Nubian or ancient Black African culture. This is attested by the art itself, but also by official and sacred Egyptian texts. Texts that are similar to the Constitution in the United States. Texts that define the framework of the kingdom. And they give us a clear answer. It came from the south. It is a Nubian kingdom, and there is absolutely no debate about that. Trying to deny this and looking for a Middle Eastern origin for this civilization in 2024 is clear proof of a lack of knowledge. Perhaps it is time to simply accept this reality and salute the gift of these ancient Africans to our world. For the history of Africa is the history of the world. If you enjoyed and learned something new from this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Do you agree with me, or do you think that these pieces are the evidence of a non-African origin for the Egyptian civilization? Do you think that the Kemites were greatly influenced by Asiatic civilizations, or did it come from Inner Africa? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Mr. Imhotep's channel, and see you in the next one.